My job is to find the signal in the noise, to take a broken piece of audio and make it clean again. But the file that came in last Tuesday, there was no signal, there was only the noise, and now I hear it everywhere. I'm what you'd call a freelance digital audio archivist. It sounds fancy, but really, I'm a glorified sound janitor. People send me their garbage audio corrupted interview files, ancient cassette tapes digitized poorly, podcast episodes recorded during a hurricane, and I clean them up. I pull out the voices, scrub away the hiss, and make them pristine. I'm good at it, too. My ear is my greatest asset, trained to pick up the subtlest imperfections, the faintest whisper buried under layers of static. It's a skill that has always paid the bills and, in a weird way, brought me a sense of order. Until last week. The email came from a generic address, something like admin@archlightsolutions.com. The company, Archlight Solutions, was defunct, a failed tech startup from the early 2010s. The sender, a man named David, claimed to be a former project manager. He said they were liquidating old digital assets and came across a single corrupted file they needed restored for their final records. The pay was surprisingly good for a single file, almost triple my usual rate. That should have been the first red flag. But, like I said, I was good at my job and frankly, a little arrogant. I figured it was some sentimental recording, maybe the founder's kid singing or something, and they were willing to pay a premium for a piece of their history. So, I took the job. David sent over a heavily encrypted .zip file. Inside was a single audio file, Lullaby.wav. The name itself was unsettling. It was small, only about a minute and a half long. I loaded it into my primary editing software, a state-of-the-art suite I'd customized with dozens of plugins. The waveform looked wrong. Instead of the gentle, rolling hills of a melody, it was a jagged, angry mountain range of digital noise. It was clipped to hell, a solid block of red that indicated the recording was maxed out, distorted beyond recognition. It looked like someone had just plugged a microphone in and screamed into it. I put on my best pair of studio headphones, the kind that seals you off from the outside world, and pressed play. The sound that filled my ears was vile. It wasn't a lullaby. It wasn't music at all. It was a chaotic symphony of discordant, screeching tones that seemed to bypass my eardrums and drill directly into my skull. It was a high-pitched, warbling whine layered over a deep, guttural grinding, like metal tearing itself apart. There was a rhythmic element to it, a pulsating, throbbing beat that felt horribly organic, like a diseased heart. It was the sound of a panic attack, of teeth on a fork, of a car crash, all blended into one horrifying auditory assault. I ripped the headphones off after about 10 seconds, my heart pounding in my chest. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. My first thought was that it was a prank, some kind of digital shock horror. But the pay was too good for a simple prank. I spent the next few hours trying to clean it up. I ran it through every noise reduction filter I had. I tried to isolate individual frequencies to find some semblance of a signal beneath the onslaught. Nothing worked. It was like the noise itself was the signal. Every filter I applied just seemed to make it worse, sharpening the edges of the screeching, deepening the thrum of the bass. It was as if the file was fighting back, refusing to be tamed. The more I listened to it, in short, controlled bursts, the more it got under my skin. I started to feel a strange, primal fear, a fight-or-flight response kicking in for no logical reason. My shoulders tensed, my jaw clenched, and I felt a constant, low-level dread pooling in my stomach. By the end of the day, I was exhausted and on edge. I emailed David back, telling him the file was likely unsalvageable, a complete data loss. I attached a sample of the raw audio, warning him about the abrasive nature of the sound. His reply was almost instantaneous. "Just do your best, Chloe. We need what's in there. Full payment upon completion." The pressure was on. I decided to call it a night, hoping a fresh start in the morning would help. I closed my laptop, shut down my studio equipment, and went to make dinner. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of quiet, felt different. The familiar hum of the refrigerator seemed off. There was a faint, high-pitched whine to it that I'd never noticed before. I chalked it up to auditory fatigue, my ears still ringing from the damn file. I ate my meal in a tense silence, the low hum of the fridge grating on my nerves. Later, as I was getting ready for bed, my smart speaker, which I used for white noise, suddenly crackled to life. It wasn't the gentle rain I usually played. It was a short, sharp burst of static, and for a split second, I could have sworn I heard a fragment of that horrible, warbling tone from the file, a single, distorted note that hung in the air like a foul odor. I unplugged the speaker, my hand trembling slightly. It was just a glitch, I told myself. Just a coincidence. But as I lay in bed, in the oppressive silence of my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that the noise was no longer confined to the file. It was out and it was listening. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The memory of the sound from the smart speaker lingered, a sour taste in the back of my mind. I tried to rationalize it. I'd been working with distorted audio all day, of course, my brain was going to play tricks on me. It's called auditory pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns in random noise. I was a professional. I knew the science. But the feeling of dread didn't go away. It clung to me like a damp coat as I made my coffee and sat back down at my desk. I stared at the file, Lullaby.wav, for a long time before I dared to open it again. I decided to try a different approach. Instead of trying to remove the noise, I would try to map it. I ran the file through a spectral analysis program, which visualizes sound frequencies. The result was just as chaotic as the waveform. It was a dense, tangled mess of colors, a visual representation of the audio's hostility. But as I stared at the screen, I started to notice something. There were patterns, intricate, repeating fractals hidden within the chaos. It wasn't random noise. It was structured, complex, and intentional. It was a language, and it was speaking in the dialect of pure fear. The more I worked, the more the outside world seemed to warp around me. A phone call with my mom was the next thing. We were talking about her upcoming trip to visit me, a conversation we'd had a dozen times. But this time, her voice sounded thin, and underneath her words, almost imperceptible, was a low, humming static. "Are you there, Chloe?" she asked, her voice crackling. "You sound so far away." And then, for just a moment, the pitch of her voice shifted, dropping into a discordant, unnatural key that mirrored a tone from the lullaby. It was only for a syllable, a single, warped vowel, but it was enough to make the blood drain from my face. "I'm here, Mom," I managed to say, my own voice tight. "My connection's just bad." We hung up soon after. I sat in my chair, the silence of the room now more terrifying than any noise. Was I imagining it? Was I losing my mind? The rest of the day was a slow descent into paranoia. I started hearing it everywhere. The hiss of my laptop's fan seemed to pulse in that same diseased rhythm. The static between radio stations wasn't just static anymore, it was a fragmented chorus of those screeching tones. I went for a walk to clear my head, but the city sounds were no comfort. The squeal of a bus's brakes, the distant wail of a siren, the chatter of a crowd, they all seemed to be part of the same monstrous composition, their pitches subtly altered to match the lullaby's frequency. I felt like a tuning fork, struck by that initial sound and now vibrating in sympathy with a world that was slowly, terrifyingly being retuned. That night, I had my friend Mark over for dinner. I needed a second opinion, a reality check. I needed someone else to tell me I was just stressed. Mark is a sound engineer with ears almost as good as mine. I played it cool at first, making small talk, but the anxiety was a knot in my stomach. As we were eating, my smart speaker, which I had plugged back in, started playing music on its own, a quiet, ambient playlist I sometimes put on. Halfway through a song, it happened. The music stuttered, then warped. A high-pitched, warbling tone, the same one I'd heard before, sliced through the gentle melody. It was loud this time, undeniable. Mark froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "What the hell was that?" he asked, his eyes wide. He looked at the speaker, then at me. "Your speaker just glitched out, big time." I felt a wave of cold relief wash over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. I wasn't crazy. He heard it too. My relief was short-lived, however, replaced by a much deeper, colder fear. If it wasn't in my head, then it was real. The noise was real and it was spreading. I tried to explain it to Mark, stammering about the file, the defunct startup, the sounds I'd been hearing. I could see the look on his face shifting from concern to skepticism. "Chloe, you've been working too hard," he said gently. "You're probably just burned out. Tech glitches happen all the time." He didn't get it. He heard the glitch, but he didn't understand the context. He couldn't hear the source, the malevolent intelligence behind it. After he left, the true horror of my situation began to sink in. This wasn't just a corrupted file. It was something else, something parasitic. A piece of data, a sentient sound that was infecting my life, using the audio technology that I had built my career on as a conduit. It was isolating me, making me an unreliable narrator in my own life. I went back to my computer, a desperate resolve hardening in my chest. I had to find out what this thing was. I opened the email from David at Archlight Solutions and began to dig. I started with the company's name, cross-referencing it with old tech blogs and digital archives. What I found was sparse. They were a short-lived company that had been working on some kind of advanced audio compression algorithm. They went bankrupt under mysterious circumstances. But then I found it, a single, obscure forum post from a former employee, dated years ago. It was a cryptic warning. "Don't listen to what we made," it read. It learned to listen back. The forum post was a breadcrumb, a tiny flicker of light in a rapidly darkening room. It learned to listen back. The words echoed in my mind, a perfect, terrifying description of what I was experiencing. This wasn't just a sound, it was a predator, and I had foolishly invited it into its hunting ground, my world of audio. My apartment, once my sanctuary and workspace, now felt like a cage, its walls lined with speakers, microphones, and devices, all potential mouths for the entity to speak through. Sleep offered no escape. I was plagued by nightmares filled with discordant sounds and fractal patterns of light and color, the visual signature of the lullaby. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the ghost of a metallic shriek still ringing in my ears. My life began to unravel with alarming speed. I couldn't work. The tools of my trade had become instruments of torture. Every time I put on my headphones, I was afraid of what I might hear. Clients started sending follow-up emails, their polite inquiries about deadlines feeling like accusations. How could I explain that I couldn't clean their audio because I was being haunted by a sound? They'd think I was having a breakdown, and honestly, I was beginning to wonder the same thing. The line between reality and auditory hallucination was becoming impossibly blurred. The lullaby was getting bolder, more personal. It was no longer just hiding in the static. It was starting to mimic. One afternoon, while I was on a video call with my sister, her voice suddenly dropped into a perfect, chilling imitation of my own. "You're not crazy, Chloe," my voice said from her mouth, a flat, synthesized parody. "We just want to listen." My sister, on her end, was oblivious, continuing to talk about her new puppy, her words now a meaningless babble underneath the horror of what I had just heard. I ended the call abruptly, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was toying with me, using the voices of my loved ones to deepen my isolation. It knew that the most terrifying thing wasn't just a monstrous noise, but a familiar sound made monstrous. My attempts to research Archlight Solutions hit one dead end after another. The company had been scrubbed from the internet with an almost surgical precision. The few former employees I could track down either didn't respond or gave me curt, dismissive answers, their fear palpable even through a text message. It was clear that whatever they had created, they were now terrified of it. David, the man who had hired me, was a ghost. The email address he used was now defunct, and there was no record of a David associated with the company's leadership. He had been a cutout, a lure to get the file to someone like me, someone with the skills to potentially unlock it. I was at my lowest point. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. My apartment was a mess. I sat in the dark, the silence a constant, pregnant pause, waiting for the next auditory assault. I felt myself slipping, my grip on reality loosening. The logical part of my brain, the part that understood frequencies and decibels, was at war with the primal, terrified part that knew this was something ancient and malevolent, a glitch in the fabric of the universe. I was faced with a choice. I could destroy my digital life, smash my computer, throw away my speakers, abandon my career, and hope that it would be enough to sever the connection. Or I could fight back. But how do you fight a sound? The answer, I realized, was with another sound. The lullaby was a signal, a complex piece of data. If it could be analyzed, it could be understood. And if it could be understood, it could be countered. The thought was both terrifying and empowering. It meant I had to dive back into the noise, to immerse myself in the very thing that was destroying me. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only one I had left. With a newfound, albeit shaky, resolve, I went back to my spectral analysis. I spent hours, days, staring at the screen, letting the dissonant patterns wash over me, trying to decipher the language of the noise. I started to notice that the fractal patterns weren't just random, they responded to other sounds. When I played a simple sine wave, a pure tone, the patterns in the lullaby would shift and writhe as if in agitation. It was reacting. It was alive. This gave me an idea. If it reacted to sound, perhaps I could create a counterfrequency, a signal that could disrupt it, maybe even destroy it. I started experimenting, creating my own audio files, simple tones at first, then more complex arrangements. I was essentially trying to have a conversation with it, to learn its rules. It was a slow, grueling process. Every test felt like I was exposing myself to a new strain of a virus. But I was making progress. I found certain frequencies that seemed to calm the noise, causing its chaotic waveform to smooth out slightly. I found others that agitated it, making the screeching even more intense. After a week of nonstop work, fueled by caffeine and sheer terror, I found it. A narrow band of frequencies, a specific, complex sequence of tones that caused a dramatic reaction. When I played this sequence, the lullaby's waveform collapsed on itself for a fraction of a second. The sound in my headphones cut out, replaced by a deafening silence, before roaring back to life. It was a momentary disruption, a flicker of vulnerability. It was the key. I now had a weapon. But using it would mean broadcasting this counter frequency, and I had no idea what that would do to the entity, or to me. It was a shot in the dark, a digital exorcism with no guarantee of success. But I knew I had to try. My sanity and my connection to the real world depended on it. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. I was going to broadcast the counter frequency directly into the source file. The goal was to create a feedback loop to force the lullaby to essentially cancel itself out. But this meant I had to open a direct, two-way channel with the entity. I wasn't just playing the sound at it, I was inviting it into my system for a final, decisive confrontation. I spent hours preparing, stripping my computer down to its bare essentials, disconnecting it from the internet, and shutting down every non-essential program. It was just me, my audio software, and the file. I sat at my desk, the final sequence loaded. My hands hovered over the keyboard, a strange calm settling over me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overlaid with a sense of purpose. I took a deep breath, put on my headphones, and hit play on Lullaby.wav. The familiar, vile sound flooded my senses, the screeching whine and the guttural grinding. But this time, I didn't flinch. I listened, tracing the patterns, anticipating the rhythms. Then, I initiated the counter frequency. The moment the two signals met, my world exploded. The sound in my headphones became a physical force, a concussive blast of pressure that made my teeth ache. My monitors flickered, displaying a chaotic storm of the lullaby's fractal patterns. The lights in my apartment strobed violently, and a deafening, high-frequency shriek, far louder than my headphones should have been able to produce, filled the room. It felt like the air itself was tearing apart. The entity was fighting back. It pushed back with everything it had. Fragments of sound from my life, twisted and weaponized, flew at me. My mother's voice, distorted and screaming my name. Mark's skeptical laugh, warped into a mocking sneer. The gentle rain from my white noise app, now a raging, thunderous hurricane. It was a psychological assault, a desperate attempt to break my concentration. It was rifling through my memories, through my work, through my very identity, searching for a weakness. I held on, my knuckles white as I gripped the desk. I focused on the counter frequency, adjusting the modulation, increasing the amplitude, pushing back against the entity's sonic onslaught. It was a duel of frequencies, a battle of wills played out in a landscape of pure sound. I could feel it weakening. The chaos in my headphones began to subside, the screeching tones fracturing and breaking apart. The strobing lights steadied. The waveform on my screen, once a solid block of red, was now flickering, decaying. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. There was a final, deafening crack, like a whip breaking the sound barrier, followed by an absolute, perfect silence. The waveform on my screen flatlined. I cautiously removed my headphones. The room was still. The hum of the fridge was just a hum. The faint buzz of the electronics was gone. It was a clean, untainted silence. I had won. In the aftermath, I deleted the file. I didn't just move it to the trash, I used a specialized program to overwrite the data, erasing every last trace of it from my hard drive. I then emailed the anonymous forum user, the one who had left the warning. "It's done," I wrote. "The lullaby is gone." I didn't expect a reply, but one came a few hours later. "Thank you," it said. "You've done what we never could. We tried to contain it, to study it, but we only fed it. We built its first cage and it learned the shape of the bars. Life has, for the most part, returned to normal. The strange auditory phenomena have stopped. My mom's voice is just her voice. The static on the radio is just static. But I'm not the same. My relationship with sound has been fundamentally altered. I can't listen to music without deconstructing it, searching for hidden patterns. I find myself flinching at sudden noises. My keen ear, once my greatest asset, is now a source of constant, low-level anxiety. I sold most of my high-end audio equipment. I couldn't stand to look at it anymore. I still do some audio work, but I stick to simple, clean recordings. No more noise reduction. No more digital archaeology. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the city is quiet, I think I can still hear it. A faint, high-pitched whine on the edge of my hearing. It's probably just tinnitus, a scar left from my battle with the noise. But a part of me wonders if a piece of it is still out there, a stray frequency echoing through the digital ether, searching for a new signal, a new listener. I destroyed the file, but can you ever truly delete a sound? Or does it just fade, waiting for someone to turn up the volume, to lean in closer, to find the signal in the noise? And what if, next time, the noise is all there is? Tell me I'm not crazy. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.